Okay, so welcome back. Last time we had started talking about culture, and so we are doing these episodes on startups, and essentially this is myself and Sumaya just talking about our combined experiences on what we've noticed around the continent, that is Africa, and even the world, based on our experience on how you can run a startup. And we are sharing our thoughts, so please, you can join us, you can comment. If you have questions, please post them there. We'll definitely have a whole session where we just answer all the questions that you have. But like from the last episode, we talked about um, culture, Smart. And I think you had started talking about culture, and I think you mentioned it. If someone has not watched it, they can go and watch towards that last part. But I want to start this episode on like building a team culture or a startup culture, an organizational culture, by asking, what are your thoughts on this? Especially how to build it and what defines a company culture or a startup culture.
So, from my experience, I think what defines a company culture is two things actually. One, it's people. It's the people you hire, and it touches a lot on their personalities, what they bring to the table, but also it's part of the responsibility of the founders to actually define or give a guidance on what what's the culture of the company. And you'll see this because at the end of the day, when all these people come into your company, you all come from different backgrounds. Maybe some guys come from a startup, another one's a recent graduate, someone else has come from a corporate.
Yeah.
So they all come in with their own thoughts, ideas of how we should operate. And sometimes, if really you don't give a guidance on that, then you start having clashes. You might even start finding the guys who came from corporate don't get the recent graduates. And I've seen this um, in companies where you have one huge engineering team and then a sales team, and then the sales teams are very formal,
Corporate,
corporate like,
yeah.
and then engineers are cool, hoodies, t-shirt, they make noise,
Like
and at some point, especially if they sit in the same place, they'll start clashing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and especially if you haven't given a guidance on, what is our team culture. So I think it really boils down to people and culture. And I always tell people, I think one, it's one skills, communication, how we run the business, what happens in the office, and then there's how people relate to each other, and that's also the other thing that you might not necessarily be able to control. But I think being able to give a guidance of there are certain standards, guidelines of how we operate as a company. So, and I'll use an example. At Microsoft, we have what's called the Standards of Business Conduct. Now, it's this document that defines, what is the culture of the company. Not culture in the sense of, what are we doing in the office, but, we talk about integrity. We talk about, respecting people, respecting individuals. And so those kind of things.
Like mannerisms.
Yeah, exactly. Anti-corruption, So if you're able to put that in place, the values, I'd call them values of a company, and define and say, hey, this is who we are as a company. And the reason I say that's important is because out there, these employees are representatives of what your company is, what your brand is. And so you kind of have to give people a guideline of this is, so when they see developer X presenting at a tech community thing, he carries around the culture of the company, the way they behave. So you kind of have to, give a guideline. I'm not saying, have military style, we do this or nothing.
Yeah.
But, so that. Two, I think, is also inculcating a culture of how people behave. Okay. So one of the ones, just to recap what I said before, is, the culture of constantly learning. Because you might find a culture in a company where we come in, we do what the job is, and we leave. It almost becomes a cyber cafe. I come, sit, do my job, go, I vanish. Or you find a team where it's the lead, and then everyone here at the bottom has no say. You're to be seen, not heard. So, I think one, learning, but also communication. I always say empower people. I always say in any company, especially now that we're going to tech, there are four things you want to look at. And maybe this is preempting a lot of the future discussions. Is one, how do you empower your team? How do you empower your employees? So whether it's engineer down there or a salesperson there, one, how do you empower them to do not only their job, but also how do you empower them to also speak? So I've in the past, had people working under me,
Yeah.
At that point is when I realized leadership is for everyone. And I realized, you carry someone's career, the experience of your company under you as a manager. And so at some point you have to look at empowering them. I know our education system does not do justice in terms of getting us to express the ideas we have. So I've actually worked with companies where the engineers have very good ideas, a very good understanding of what needs to be done, but because they're not empowered to actually speak or express or share their ideas, they sit at their corner, write their code, and you never hear from them. Yet they're the guys who really, and at the end of the day, if you look at you being a founder up here, you want to hire people who are better than you at certain things, because then they empower you, they help you give they give you a different perspective, but also you help them build their strengths. And so you get more freedom to start thinking about strategy, and you now empower them to grow. So I don't want to hog the entire conversation.
No.
Definitely.
I'm actually learning something here where it's important for me to say that you've actually talked about now that building it and like giving that perspective on startup cultures. I actually wanted to cover it from the perspective of, once you've covered that, is to talk about, probably someone is wondering, so how do you do, what should you start with, what should you do next? Let me start with the don'ts. Don't take something that you've watched on TV and say you want to implement it. That's like a huge fail, and there's so many reasons for that. I've seen guys who try and emulate, we're gonna be doing
like Google.
like Google, we're gonna be like Googlers, and you don't understand why they have their...
You don't have the background of, how did they
Exactly.
get there? What is the process? What do they need to get there?
That's the thing, and then some of these things that you want to implement do not even align to your values. I like what you said, that the culture of the company is also part of it, is like the value system of also the founder. The other bit that is also important to mention is, now when you want to start implementing your values, I think there's the whole learning bit, and I have tips for this. It's important for you to educate people. So the steps of educating is, you could get an external person to come. You have your friends, you have your network. You could call them and say, hey guys, I'm getting a PR person to come and talk to us about how do you do proper PR when you're out there. I'm getting someone to come to talk to us about dressing, maybe a fashion person. Guys, today we are having that educational bit. An accountant is going to talk to us about this, or even a psychologist, and all this, so they can ask questions.
And I think it's spot on. The exposure, it is very important.
Yeah.
I think it's also one of the things that really help your team then be even more motivated to do the work that they do. So if I feel empowered, I feel valued in the company, then I will put in everything that I need to make sure it's successful. So if say I work under someone, and this someone is constantly looking at my career growth, my exposure, my skill, I think one of the things I'm really thankful for, the opportunities that I've had managers in my past who've given me the opportunity to learn and be exposed to all sorts of things. And I think it really opens up your mind to very many different things, but also changes your perspective of things, because we all go into places with a very with our own perspectives of how things happen. And I think for guys out there who you have a team under you, I'd encourage you, do everything in your power as a manager to grow your team. Give them access to skills, exposures. Take that dev one day to a customer meeting. Get them to understand, where does the product that they build go to? Because then that gives them a whole perspective of, okay, so now I understand where this product goes to. I can now build for that person. So you don't have a situation where you have engineers cooped up in a room for months, and they're building products based on what they themselves think will work, and they never know where the product goes to. So I think, that giving that person that level of exposure, and constantly, because at the end of the day, we're people, we're always looking for some level of, belonging, and we're always looking for, like, I'll tell you this, I've seen people who will take up jobs based on the exposure it gives them, not the money. So I think it's important to create that culture where people, and also create a culture of self-discipline. So I know you've seen companies in the past where if I am not there as a manager, nothing happens.
It's a very
I don't know how to describe it, but it's a very
Totalitarian, I think.
exactly.
So. Very, very.
So where if my boss is not here, we are not doing work. So I think that self-discipline, and with that means you have to go define processes. You have to go define guidelines. Give people guidelines, and then now let them do what the work that they do, but also hold them accountable. So hold them accountable and responsible. I think so. That is touching on what you said. How do you build that culture?
Yeah.
Is giving those guidelines and giving them empowering them to actually do that by giving them the right tools, giving them guidelines, and clearly communicating processes and clearly communicating what you need to do.
And then the other thing on exposure, also, it's a thing nowadays. Once someone is a founder, they want to go to these conferences and speak. It doesn't hurt if you ask one of them, hey, I'm going for this conference. I'd love it if you go and share, and we did this talk together. It's really, I'm telling you, the number of times I did it in the companies I was doing. It really boosts someone's esteem, and they actually write you these texts and tell you, hey, thank you for this opportunity, that was really insightful, I don't want to do another one again. And they start to become these ambassadors of the company itself. And what better thing than to have an employee defending your company very passionately? And so there's that bit. There's also the bit where try and also think about, yes, it's about serious, but also try and think about, is there a play thing within the company?
Yeah. Work hard, play hard.
Exactly. I love the organization currently I am writing code for, or I work for. That's Napo, but I really love it because of one thing. Within the charts themselves, we have a very nice free thing where literally, I mean, he is my boss, but then he tells you, don't call me boss. Do not call me boss. I mean, there's no problem. If you want to be addressed as the master-in-chief, Lord Commander, without me, nothing can happen. And then that's when I say, yeah, so good morning. That's fine. But I think it's just for you to decide that. And I think culture is something that's very important, because most people fail to also understand that the culture of the company will make you to either attract good talent or get bad talent, will make you to actually execute your vision or not execute your vision.
It's about people.
Exactly. And so that's the thing that I think would be interesting to also like delve further, that is in the coming episodes. So I think that's a wrap for this episode.
There's much more we can talk
there's
about.
much more we can talk about, but let's wrap that with this one. And I think join us for the next episode. We'll still be covering stuff to do with startups. And if you've not subscribed, please subscribe, like, you can share this to people. So, thank you.
See you. So guys, thank you for joining us as we talk about startups with Frank. We'd love to hear what you guys think, and please do go comment, gang. Hope to see you in the comment section. Give us feedback around what you'd love to hear us talk about in the future episodes. And thank you for watching. Like, share, and subscribe.